This is a collection of real TOEFL speaking samples from actual TOEFL test takers that have been kind enough to share their speaking so we all can learn something from them. Some of the students did really great and score really high. Some of them make some common mistakes that you really need to avoid on test day. So make sure you watch all of this entire video collection and make sure that you pay attention to my feedback, because it'll really help you do your best and score the highest possible score you can get on test day. There's some really easy mistakes you can avoid here. So you'll see sample responses for all of the questions. Question 1, 2, 3, and 4, there'll be 2 samples from each, along with my feedback. But that's it. Let me stop talking and just get into the samples. I hope you guys enjoy this, and yeah, enjoy. TOEFL speaking question 1 is a bit confusing, and one of the best ways to get better at it is to learn from the examples of others. This question: would you prefer to work at one job your entire life or to switch jobs every 5 years? Explain your response with details and examples. So let's listen to his example right now, and he had one big problem holding him back from getting a higher score of 26 or more. And it has to do with his language use, with his vocabulary and grammar. So let's listen in, and maybe you can find what the mistake was. Here we go.
Personally speaking, I would prefer to switch jobs every 5 years. I feel so for several reasons. Firstly, in switching jobs every 5 years, I get to meet new friends and making new friends, thereby adding new friend base. For example, as a developer, I would meet new software developers that help me grow. Secondly, I also have work exposure. I'll have higher work exposure, learning from higher experts. For example, as a software developer, I switched from my company last year, which helped me to meet other software developers and learn immensely from their experience. This has helped me grow in my career. This is why I think so.
All right, so this is his whole response here. I highlighted in red some of the problems. Do you see some of the problems here? I know this transcript isn't perfect. It's just what was created based on his speaking. And I ran this through my speaking score. They use SpeechRadar at this website, so you can check that out. And it gave him a score of grammatical accuracy of 15 out of 100. So his grammar really held him back. So what was the problem exactly? Well, I highlighted in red some of the issues here, but maybe you're studying on your own and you don't have a teacher like me to help you. So the goal here is for you to get really good at grading yourself. So maybe you don't have access to a teacher that can highlight all this stuff and tell you what the mistakes are. That's where you can use a free website like Quillbot, and let me show you what it looks like. Quillbot or Grammarly is another great example. I just copy and pasted his response here, and I can highlight the different problems with the grammar. So he has the past tense with learned, it should be learn. Same thing with worked, it should be a different tense there. So you can actually take your transcript, so after you speak and you get a transcript or you type your own transcript, then you put it into something like Grammarly or Quillbot, and it will automatically check your grammar and you can fix it. So that's what you should do when you're practicing alone. Answer a question. You can use my speaking score if you want, but you do have to pay for it. So answer a question, write a transcript, and then put the transcript in Grammarly or Quillbot, and you'll get feedback on your response. Student needs help with his grammar. So I would tell him not to fix every little thing, but maybe 2 or 3 things here. For example, instead of I get to meet new friends and making, I get to meet new people and make new friends. Make sure you have the same verb tense in the same sentence. He says meet and making, so it has to be meet and make, right? I would meet new software developers, so that's okay. Who would help, who could help me grow? Who could help me grow? So that's another way. I would also have more work exposure. And again, you can use a automatic grammar checker to do this stuff for you. You could use a teacher, but you can do this on your own as well. But just focus on 2 or 3 things, and then here's the rewritten response, the rewritten transcript. And what I would do is I would just say this out loud. Just speak out loud, do the same response again, and just read it and get used to the grammar. And then when you practice tomorrow, focus on grammar and trying to get better at it. Maybe you're focusing just on using the present tense. Maybe you want to use would correctly. Just have one goal to get better at tomorrow. And for this student, I would say grammar you have to focus on. Go through Grammarly or Quillbot, and then you can get some feedback. Practice another question tomorrow. Focus on your grammar. Now I'm really excited for this next video to show you a student who speaks at a perfect pace, and I want to show you that in a minute. But before I do, I have to shout out speakerenglish.com. It's a new project of mine where I created TOEFL speaking study plans. You practice 1 question a day, just like this, writing a transcript, getting feedback on it, and it's guaranteed to improve your score in 30 days. So check that out. If you have time, check out this next video about TOEFL Speaking Question 1, where this student really understood the exact pace of how he should speak. And because he knew the pace, he was able to score really high for this question. All right, check that video out here. I'll see you there. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. We're gonna look at TOEFL Speaking Question 1. It's hard to practice TOEFL on your own, so let's look at some examples from students to give you a better idea of how you should respond and also how you should practice before test day. So we're going to look at this TOEFL Speaking Question 1, which is, would you prefer to work at one job your entire life or to switch jobs every 5 years? Explain with details and examples. And we're going to listen to a student who did a really good job with delivery. So I want you to focus on how he speaks. And I'm going to focus on one specific part of how he speaks, and we'll talk about that together after we listen. Okay, so let's listen in right now. And give the student a grade. What do you think? What do you think he would score? Here we go.
I would prefer to switch jobs every 5 years, and I believe this for 2 reasons. The first one is better opportunity and salary. For example, my brother has worked in several companies in India, and he is currently earning more than his friends who have been sticking to the same company since the time they graduated. And the second reason is that I will be able to learn new skills. For example, I'm from a tech background, and each and every company is working on different tech stacks and different technologies. So if I switch companies every 5 years, I will be able to learn new technologies and work on different tech stacks, which is really good for my career as an engineer. And that is why I will choose to switch jobs every 5 years.
Okay, so pretty good, right? I highlighted a couple things here. I'm going to talk about it with you together. Just so you know, for these transcripts, for example, he says tax. I don't think that's what he was trying to say. This is an automatic transcript, so there will be some instances where what he says and what the transcript says is not lined up. But that's okay. We're not going to worry about that right now. This was run through My Speaking Score. They use the SpeechRater technology, and you can use it as well. Check out My Speaking Score. His score was a 28 out of 30, really high score. And I want to focus in on his sustained speech score, which was 90 out of 100. What is sustained speech? You could think of sustained speech as thinking smoothly, speaking smoothly. It means pausing at the right time. You don't say each word individually. You say each word individually. You don't say words individually. You bring words together. You bring words together. So he's bringing words together and pausing at the right time. Usually we pause before commas, periods, and conjunctions. This isn't always the case, but it is often the case. Conjunctions are words like and, or, but. Okay. So let's listen to his response again, and I'm just going to play the first part and show you why he scored so highly in this part, in this sustained speech. Let's look at where he pauses to take a breath. And it's really important. This is a really hard thing to do, actually.
I would prefer to switch jobs every 5 years, and
I prefer to switch jobs every 5 years. And so he's taking a breath before the and. That's where you want to take a breath. Some people saying this sentence, they would say, I would prefer to switch jobs every 5 years. You see how it's a different speed, right? Different sustained speech. He pauses at good times.
I believe this for two reasons. The first one is better opportunity and salary. For example, my brother has worked in several companies in India.
So for example, pause, my brother has worked in several companies in India. Pause. Okay, so you can get the idea of how this sustained speech works. He's bringing things together really smoothly. And so that's something that might be an issue for you. You might be saying each word kind of statically, and you have to bring words together. Now, how do you do that? How do you practice that? It's a hard thing to practice, a hard thing to do. Well, what you would do is you would listen to a sample response like this one and practice shadowing. So shadowing, I'll just go back to his responses. You basically play until there's a pause and you try to say it the same way.
I would prefer to switch jobs every 5 years.
I would prefer to switch jobs every 5 years.
And I believe this for two reasons.
And I believe this for two reasons. That's how I would practice shadowing, trying to bring these words together. Some people don't like shadowing. Some people think it's not very helpful, or it's really boring. You just want to do one question, 100 words about, like this here, it's about 130 words, okay? And you just shadow this one question, that's all you do, it takes 5 minutes. And the idea is that you get used to how you should pause, how to bring words together. If you want a sample response to shadow, you should check out our site. Let me get to it here, speakerenglish.com. So this is a new site that I made with speaking plans. And part of the plan is that every day you answer one question, just like this question, one TOEFL speaking question. And besides your answer, you also see an example answer, and you can shadow from that example answer. There's audio and transcript. So check it out, Speaker English, a new little side project of mine, only for speaking, only for study plans, tells you what to do every day. So check that out. That's it. If you're ready to go to question number 2, I got a video for you here talking about TOEFL speaking question 2 and giving you an example of a student speaking and one thing that this student did wrong. So check that out. I'll put a link somewhere here. All right. Thanks for watching. I'll see you there. Let's listen to a TOEFL speaking sample answer for question number 2. And the student struggles with what to say in the moment, what to say next. And that's the question we're going to try to answer by the end of this. What should you do when you don't know what to say next? The question that we're going to look at, question number 2, is you have to read and listen. We're not going to do the reading and listening passage. The student doesn't have any trouble with content. We're going to focus just on their delivery, how they speak. They're going to talk about a graduation ceremony and the woman's opinion on that ceremony. So, focusing on delivery, let's listen in right now. Here we go.
Okay, first of all, the woman disagreed with the idea that having two ceremonies. One of the reasons are her friends, because they probably wouldn't be at the same ceremony. And she said that, the man said that it will probably last 3 hours. And then she said that they can reduce these hours, limiting the number of speakers. So also, the auditorium allows only 2 invitations per student, so she proposed to do the ceremony outside, maybe on June when the weather is warm. So I think she's kind of crazy, but that's what she states.
Okay, so that's his response. I highlighted and read some things that I wanted to talk about. So after running it through my speaking score, he got a score of 18 out of 30 and an 18 out of 100 on a scoring dimension called pause frequency. So that means that basically he paused too much. So what he needs to do is he needs to pause less often. When he gives his response, he says, so, and she said, the man said, then she said, then she states. So I can tell that he does know some template language, like he starts with first of all, and one of the reasons, also. So he has some good discourse markers here. He has some good template language, but he needs a bit more because he has some trouble going from one sentence to the next sentence, from one idea to the next idea. And so that's thinking in the moment, what to do in the moment. So how can he do better? How can he go from one idea to the next idea? Well, he should learn a few discourse markers. And he knows some already. These are basically words like first of all, for example, in my opinion. So we're going to call them transition words or phrases. So he doesn't have to learn a bunch of new phrases, just a couple, maybe 2 or 3. I gave some ideas here. These are pretty common. For example, when you want to add information, in addition, as a matter of fact, and actually. I'm going to show you how to use these in a minute, but I'm just going to introduce them first. When you emphasize information, when you want to say that something's important, in fact, or more importantly. And when he's giving, ordering ideas, so another reason, secondly, she goes on to say. I think he actually knows some of this stuff, but he needs a bit more because he's thinking too much between ideas. He's saying so too much. He's saying she said, the man said, the woman said, the man said. He needs to kind of expand his vocabulary a bit and also pause less often. I think he should also use some synonyms for said. I think he says say, the man says, the woman says a bit too much. Mention, explain, suggest, goes on to, I think is great, and talk about. Because those are phrases, and phrases give you a bigger, higher score on TOEFL than just one word vocabulary. So if you have to say he says or he goes on to say would be a stronger word, would give you a stronger score because it's a phrase length. You need to say goes and on to say. You have to say all that together and use it correctly. That's hard to do. So you would get a higher score on TOEFL if you use more phrases like that. So keep that in mind. So I rewrote a couple things. I think his beginning was great. He said first of all, and one of the reasons. I changed, this is where he had some trouble where, and she said, the man said, and she said. So I changed a couple things. Instead of and, well, the man explains that it will probably last 3 hours. He goes on to say. And then in addition. In addition, again, is a phrase. May score a little bit better than also. Also is one word, in addition is 2, so it's a phrase. And also, dude, stop saying so. At the end, he said so a lot, way too much. So you want to try, and I've just said so right now. So, it's pretty common to say so, but you want to try to reduce that as much as possible on test day. Instead of so, I cut that out, and she proposed, and also instead of so, I think, in fact. He does a lot of things really well, but those are some changes that he should make to try to reduce his pauses. That's what we want to do with him, reduce his pauses. Now, he sees my example, he knows that he's saying so too much, and he needs to expand his vocabulary a little bit, and he should use some transition words. How should he practice that? So before I recommend an activity for him, I'm going to give a promo shout out to speakerenglish.com. We have a TOEFL speaking study plan that is designed to help you improve your speaking by 30 days, and it's guaranteed to work. And it's pretty simple. You practice one question, 15 minutes a day. You take a deep look at that one question and you change a couple things like we're doing here basically. And you go through this process every day. You have a community, you have support from teachers like me and others. Check it out, speakerenglish.com. What activities should he do to help him reduce the amount of times he says so? So this is one thing he should do that I've already explained, that he should write a transcript, look at his response, change some words, change some vocabulary, and then do the same response again. But also, he says the word so a bit too much, and a lot of times people have trouble saying or too much. And I made this video giving some advice and a specific activity to help you reduce the amount of times you say or so when you speak. Check that video out. Thanks for watching, and I will see you there. In this video, we're going to look at a really interesting sample response from a student who scored an almost perfect score on grammar through SpeechRater. SpeechRater is ETS's TOEFL speaking software. You go to the site My Speaking Score, you can use it yourself. And this student got a grammatical accuracy score of a 99 out of 100. So pretty much a perfect score and a 26 over 30 overall. Now, you might be wondering, what does this look like? What would a response with a perfect grammar score look like? Well, surprisingly, the grammar is not perfect. There's some mistakes. This is his transcript, and there are some issues he has, but a lot of things are very well done, and he scored a 99 out of 100. So let's listen to his response to this question. It's a question 2. It's about a woman's opinion on the graduation ceremony. I'll put a link in the description to the question. I'm not going to play the listening and reading here, but if you wanted to try the question, you could check out that link. But let's listen in and let's talk a bit about his grammar, and we're going to find out why he scored so well so you can do the same thing on test day. All right? It's not just about having really good grammar. He follows a certain set of rules, and I'm going to show you how to do that after we listen to his response. So let's listen together right now. Here we go.
The reading passage announces a change on campus about the graduation ceremony. Instead of one ceremony, the graduation would be divided in 2 ceremonies. A woman and a man are discussing about it. The woman is strongly against this change because she fears she might not be able to attend the ceremony with her friends. The man says that this decision is mainly about the high number of students that have enrolled this year, and usually the graduation ceremonies take too long. Last year, for instance, it took 3 hours for the graduation ceremony. The woman says it's because of the organization. They take too long for the speakers. They can cut it up so that we focus on more people on the graduation. And she also says that the graduation ceremony can be held outside to accommodate more people.
Okay, so that's his response. This is the transcript here. And so he had a couple of mistakes, but I want to focus on what he did well. And he really used the most important grammar and particularly verb tenses for TOEFL. So these are the only real verb tenses you need in your responses. Simple present or simple past, the present perfect, and would, could, or should. He should have done this, we could do this, I would have done that. So those are some things you could say, but for the most part, you just need simple present, simple past, and present perfect. Don't really need a conditional sentence or anything else like that. Focus on these verb tenses when you're speaking for the TOEFL speaking. And I'll show you what I mean here. So he tried to use the present progressive in the 3rd sentence where he says, a woman and a man are discussing. Just use the simple present, discuss. Don't use present progressive here because that means it's happening right now, and it's not happening right now. It just happened before. Remember on the TOEFL, you read and listen and then you speak. And so you can either talk about what you heard and what you read. You can either say it in the simple past or the simple present. I recommend the present, but it's up to you. So he used the present in the beginning. He says the reading passage announces. And then talking about the idea from the reading, it would be divided in 2 ceremonies. So he does a good job with would there. And the woman is against the idea, so using the present. She fears, using the present. The man says. And then present perfect. He knows when to change it to the present perfect, talking about their experience. They have enrolled this year, okay? The graduation ceremony takes too long, so he switched it to the present because he knew that took is when it happened once in the past, but it's talking about the ceremonies every year. So since it's every year, it's a habit, take, right? And then, you guys get the idea for the most part. So he had a couple little mistakes, but he knows when to change it. And you got to know how to do that on test day. Pretty much when you're talking about what they said, use the simple present. You can use the present perfect when you're talking about their experience, like they have been in school for 3 years. And then also the could or would or should if you're imagining what could happen or what should happen. Now, there was another weakness about this student speaking that I'm going to talk about, but before I do, check out speakerenglish.com. We have TOEFL speaking study plans where you get something to do every day, and it's guaranteed to improve your speaking in 30 days or your money back. Got nothing to lose. Check it out, speakerenglish.com. We also have a Discord there that I'm in. I'm very active there, and so you can communicate with me, ask questions, and I'll be there to answer them for you. So check it out, speakerenglish.com, and I'll be there. Now, what is one of the weaknesses the student had? Well, one thing that he didn't do so well, he did it a couple times, was intonation. You know, he had some trouble going up at the right time and going down at the right time. But is that an issue? Does that even matter? Check out this video here where I talk about a student sample and her intonation. So, and if you need to work on that. So check that out. I'll see you there, and thanks for watching. All right, take care, guys. What's going on, TOEFL test takers? Excited about this one because it's a question I get often. How do you work on your pronunciation without a teacher? And do you even have to work on your pronunciation? So let's talk about it right now. And we're going to look at an example from a student who answered a question 3 example. And this was about swarm intelligence. So you would listen to a lecture and read about it in a passage and then talk about it. We're not going to look at the question here. I'll put a link in the description if you want to check that out. But we want to focus on this student's example, and we're going to focus on his delivery, how he speaks. And will pronunciation get in the way of his score? Let's find out. Here we go. Oh, by the way, I'm also going to show you if pronunciation is a problem for you, I'm going to show you how to work on it after we listen. Okay, so let's listen first. Here we go.
Swarm intelligence means that insects will have some collective activity to compose as a super brain to finish complex work. So the professor mentioned that humans use this kind of concept in AI field and also in nature. Ants, for example, when they are trying to find a shortage for food resources, they will send a kind of chemical called pheromone. So those pheromone will enhance when ants on the path. So less path will be a super highway to find the food. And second is the honeybees. Honeybees, they are in adverse weather, they lose their nest. So the queen bee will send the pheromone on specific branch. So they will create a new nest for all bees.
Okay, so that's his response. This is the whole thing written out. And what I did is that I highlighted some examples of the words that, so this transcript is automatically generated. What that means is that once you upload your audio, it makes this transcript, and the computer is making it based on what the computer hears. And sometimes the computer hears the wrong word. So this is some examples of words or phrases that the computer did not understand. So he wasn't trying to say small intelligence, he was trying to say swarm intelligence. And so it didn't understand that, and so it wrote that in. And so there's a couple of examples of that here. I'll talk about what that means in a minute, but I want to go back to the question, does pronunciation even matter? So in my speaking score, this is the grading criteria that ETS uses, their speech rater. They don't have a score for pronunciation. There's no pronunciation score. The closest thing to a pronunciation score is your vowels. That's, you know, A, E, I, O, U, and all the other vowel sounds in English. And if your vowel sounds sound the way that they should, basically. And he scored a vowel sound score of 80 out of 100. It's a very high score. So this is the closest thing the TOEFL has to pronunciation score, and he did just fine. So does he have to work on his pronunciation? You know, does that even matter? Well, if it were only the computer score, maybe not. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe he doesn't have to work on that. But remember, your TOEFL score is graded by a human rater and the computer. So it's both. So if a human rater hears this response, they might take off some points when it comes to delivery, because there's some things about your delivery that needs work, that he needs work on. So, you know, pronunciation isn't really an issue until people don't understand what you're saying. And when people don't understand what you're saying, then you have to start thinking about pronunciation and how to work on it. Now, how do you work on it at home? So this student, I would say that he might need some help with pronunciation. I say, you know what, you might want to try a few things with pronunciation. The bad news about working on pronunciation is that it takes a long time. So it's not really the first thing I would recommend, but this student seems to be pretty good at the structure of his TOEFL response. He seems to know how to deliver the response. He seems to know how to prepare and how to organize everything. So it seems like he's going to need some help with general fluency, and part of that is pronunciation. What I would do is that I would take this transcript and I would do the following activity. Now, before I get to the activity, I want to just promote speakerenglish.com. We have 30-day speaking plans that are guaranteed to improve your TOEFL score. You have something to do every day. You don't have to think about, how do I practice speaking at home? What should I do? How do I improve? What should I do before test day? You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Everything is done for you at speakerenglish.com. Check it out. We also have a community on Discord with a bunch of other TOEFL test takers and people who are trying to improve their English in general. I'm there every day. If you want to ask me questions, almost every day, check it out at speakerenglish.com. Okay, so let me get back to the lesson. Now, what should he do? One good thing about practicing speaking this way is that you have a transcript. When you have a transcript, you can use that transcript to see some of your weaknesses. So what I would tell him to do is to take the words, sentences that he had trouble with and try to say them correctly. And how should he do that? So basically, in this first example, it says small intelligence. He wanted to say swarm intelligence, right? Instead of saying super brand, he wants to say super brain. So let's use Google Docs to help us, and let me show you how that works. Okay, so I have a Google Doc open here, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use a tool. Let me see if I can find it here. Tools, and there's a tool called voice typing. So I have this voice typing tool here. I'm going to record my voice. I have it set to English here, and I want to try to get the voice typing to match this sentence, and if it doesn't match, it means I have to try again. This sentence is a little long. I might chop it up into 2 sentences, but let me try it with 1 sentence and see how it goes. So remember, this is the sentence. It said small instead of swarm and brand instead of brain. So I'm focusing on these 2 here. All right, here we go. Swarm intelligence means that insects will have some collective activity to compose as a super brain to finish complex work. All right, so I got it here. Swarm intelligence, good. Means that insects will have some collective activity as a super brain to finish complex work. Good, so I did it correctly. That's how you should practice. Use a software that does text-to-speech like this. It doesn't have to be Google Docs. And see where the AI messed up your pronunciation and see if you can match it. So I would do the same activity for this sentence, and I would just keep doing that. I would read the same response again aloud. After I did that, after I checked my speaking and tried to match my speaking to the speech to text, after I did that, I would read the same response again aloud and just focus on pronunciation of difficult sounds, and then try to use 2 of those words with similar sounds in my response tomorrow. So I might try to say brain tomorrow. I had some trouble with the word brain instead of brand. It didn't understand swarm intelligence, but let's see. Maybe I can use useless. Okay, I'll try to use this. Humans use this. So I'll try to use the phrase use this in my response tomorrow. So use this. And what was the other one? Super brain. So use this and brain. I'll try to use those 2 tomorrow and practice my pronunciation a bit. And you just follow that process. It's not something that's going to be magic. His pronunciation isn't going to be perfect tomorrow, but it's just identifying your weaknesses, identifying the things that are a problem for you, and then working on them slowly, step by step. Now, besides pronunciation, some people worry about speed. Am I speaking fast enough? Well, I'm going to talk about that in this video here. Check this out. I'm going to show an example of a student who speaks pretty fast, and she gets a good score in speaking speed, but do you actually have to speak that fast? And what is a good speed to speak on test day? So check that video out. I'll talk about speed, and I'll see you there. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. And we're looking at TOEFL Speaking question 3, but more specifically, we're going to look at a problem that some people feel that they have. They feel like they speak too slowly. I speak too slowly, what should I do? Well, how do you know if you speak too slowly? Well, we're going to look at an example here of a student that speaks really fast. Do you have to speak as fast as this student? Let's find out. We're going to talk about that together. So we're going to look at TOEFL Speaking question 3. There's an example about swarm intelligence. I'm not going to put up the reading and listening, but I'll put a link in the description to the question. You can check that out there and you could practice if you would like. We're going to focus on her delivery. You know, there's other things that you're graded on test day, but for this particular student, we're going to focus on how she speaks and particularly her speaking rate, her speaking speed. So let's listen right now. Here we go.
The narrator explains the concept of swarm intelligence, which is a natural phenomena, and it is actually decentralized brain, or we can say it is collective consciousness. She explains it with the help of two examples, ants and honeybee. In case of ants, one ant releases a pheromone and the other ant gets the signal of the pheromone and follows the first ant. The third ant comes and follows the second ant, and as each ant release a pheromone, the pheromone traps is a certain track which is marked by the whole community of ants to the nest. The second example of is honeybee, which is almost the same, where the queen honeybee release a pheromone attract the rest of the group. In case of adverse condition, when they has to lose their home and find the new one, the queen honeybee release the pheromone, or the rest get collected together.
Okay, so that was her response. This is everything written out. I highlighted some things in red that I'll talk about in a minute. But I'm going to talk about her speaking score. This is based on the TOEFL E-Rater, the speech rater. This is what they use to grade your speaking on test day. This is a human grader. And one of the grading dimensions, one of the grading criteria is speaking rate. And her speaking rate was 87 out of 100, so really high score, which means that her speed is good, right? Now, do you have to speak as fast as her? No. Her words per minute, I forget right now, but it's something around 160. You should try to have at least 140 words per minute. One way you can check that is to basically speak for 60 seconds and then make a transcript and then see how many words you have. It's pretty simple. That should be your goal. If you're not at that level or you're not there yet, don't worry about it too much. You know, it takes time. I'm going to show you some activities to do actually right now to help you improve your speed, but that should be the kind of goal. They actually give a bigger number for some experts, say like 170 words or more. I just say 140 should be enough. So that should be your goal. All right. Now, how can you improve your speaking speed if this is an issue for you? So let's get to that answer right now. The first thing you should do is read the same response again aloud at least 5 seconds faster. So when you're practicing for TOEFL and when you do a speaking question, you will naturally speak a little bit slower. You'll have more hesitations, there'll be more uhs or ums. It's a performance, you know, you're partly nervous, you've never answered this question before, and you have to speak for a long time. So it's natural to speak a bit slowly or to have a couple hesitations or pauses when you do a speaking question for TOEFL the first time. So after you finish it, have a transcript and then just read it aloud. And reading it aloud, you should naturally be faster. And you should try to aim to make your response at least 5 seconds faster reading it aloud. The goal is that after you do that, read it aloud 5 seconds faster, maybe 10 seconds faster, then you kind of get used to how it should feel, how the rhythm should be, you know, when you should stop, when you should start, how to bring sentences together. And over time, it won't be magic, you won't be speaking faster tomorrow, but over time you'll get better at understanding how to pause, how to bring words together, and how to improve your speed. I highlighted a couple things in red here from this student because she actually spoke faster than I would. Like, she didn't take a breath in these places where I highlighted in red. The narrator explains the concept of soaring intelligence, which is a national phenomenon. So I wouldn't have said it like that. I would have said, the narrator explains the concept of soaring intelligence, which is a natural phenomenon. So she actually doesn't pause as much as I would, or as much as you can. You know, you can pause more than her. You don't have to speak at the same speed at her. She speaks very fast, and she kind of brings everything together very quickly. You don't have to do that. She did a good score. I wouldn't ask her to change anything. She's doing just fine. She doesn't have to, you know, reduce her speed or anything like that. It's just not necessary. You don't have to speak that fast. Now there's another activity that you can do to help you with your speed. But before I go to that, part of that is part of speakerenglish.com. We have a 30-day speaking study plan. It actually goes up to 90 days, but we're guaranteed to improve in 30 days. You get a question to answer every day. You get extra practice. You get more sample answers with my feedback. You get a TOEFL speaking course. I mean, there's just a ton of stuff included in these study plans. Check it out at speakerenglish.com and the 30-day TOEFL speaking study plan. Everything's laid out for you. You don't have to worry about how to practice for the TOEFL. It's all there. All right, so what other activity can the student do? Well, they should find an example of a response to shadow. So you get used to when to stop, when to start, when to bring words together. This student's response might not be the best one to shadow because it's difficult to do, and it might feel a little unnatural for some people. So I have another video that shows you how to practice shadowing. I'm going to put a link to it here to check that out. That'll also help you with speaking speed. But that's it. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you found this helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, take care. TOEFL speaking question 4 is often the hardest for most students, but there are some common problems that I see, not just for question 4, but for any of the TOEFL questions. And people ask me, what's one of the common problems you see? Well, I'm going to get into that in this example right now. We're going to look at a student's response to a question number 4, which is to talk about how a museum preserves artifacts. If you want to listen to the audio for this question, I'll put a link in the description below. You can check it out. But the student's content is fine, so we're not going to worry about the content. We're going to focus more on the delivery, some part of the speaking that needs a bit of work, and this is a big problem for question 4. So let's listen together right now, and then we'll talk about the issue. Here we go.
So according to the lecture, the artifacts deterioration is inevitable. That's why a museum preserved those artifacts. So they need a stable temperature that is critical. So they need the same temperature day and night. One change of temperature can be dangerous because the materials is wood, paper, and it can dry out. So the power also they have a backup power in case there is a stop in the power, and it can change then the temperature. So as well, moisture in the air, humidity develop mold and make the artifact more fragile. So different humidity depends of materials, and there are sensors in the place in the museum that can preserve those artifacts.
Okay, so this is her whole response written out, and of course I've highlighted some of the issues, and it's about or and this is pretty common on question number 4 because you know you don't know what you're going to listen to, and then you listen to a passage and then you have to speak about it for 60 seconds. It's pretty tough. So to think about, oh, what do I have to say next? What do I have to say next? It takes time. So when we need time to think, we use so, okay, and it's very common. So she struggled with speaking rate. I ran through my speaking score. This is the speech rater that ETS uses to grade your speaking, and her speaking rate was a 37 out of 100, so she had some trouble with this here. Now, what should she do? How should she fix these issues where she says or too much? So what she should do is pretty simple. She should repeat the same response again and say or 3 times or less. That's it. So she, according to the transcript, she said or about 8 times. She probably said it about 12 or 15 times. Try to repeat the same response again. You can even read it aloud. Just try to say or 3 times or less. If you need time to think, just pause and be quiet and don't say anything. Or use a discourse marker like, for example, in my opinion, first of all, something like that. Now, besides this activity, another thing that she can do to practice saying or less is to get used to speaking for 1 minute straight. You know, it's a weird thing to speak for a minute straight. You know, most of us, we just answer questions, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. We don't usually speak for longer periods of time. So it's natural to say or especially when you're trying to speak longer. So by practicing every day, 1 minute a day, like this, you kind of get used to how you should speak, and also you know, okay, I have to start reducing some of these vocal fillers. And one of the best ways to practice like this is through the study plans at speakerenglish.com. We have a TOEFL speaking study plan where you get up to 90 days of practice, where you know exactly what to do every day, and you're guaranteed to improve your score in 30 days, so you have nothing to lose. And you also get a community of people also practicing for the TOEFL, and access to people like me and other teachers to help give you some guidance. Check that out, speakerenglish.com. Had to sneak that in there. But she also has another problem that I have to talk about a little bit. That's her rhythm. Now, her rhythm score on my speaking score was 18 out of 30. What does that mean, rhythm? Well, rhythm is how you say multi-syllabic words. Always trouble pronouncing that. So basically words with 2 or more syllables. Declaration, temperature, dangerous. So temperature, dangerous. You might have some trouble putting stress on the right syllable there. That's really important, and she had trouble with that. Now, how should she work on that? I'm going to talk about that in the next video here. Check this out, where I go into more detail about syllable stress and how to work on it. All right, so hope you found that helpful, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, we're going to look at a high-scoring example of question 4. And this sample brings up an interesting question, which is, do you need to have a certain accent when you speak? How do you know if your accent is too strong? How do you know if pronunciation is something that you might have to work on? So we're going to talk about that together through this example. And I think you might find some of the answers surprising. I'm also going to show you in a couple minutes, I'm going to show you some activities to do to work on pronunciation and accent if that's an issue for you. So we're looking at an example from question 4. This is an example where the listening talks about preserving museum artifacts. I'm going to put a link in the description to the question. You can check it out. We're not going to listen to it here. We're going to focus just on the sample answer, and we're going to focus on the delivery, how the student speaks, and if it's something that is a problem. Well, let's see. Here we go.
The lecture discusses how archaeological artifacts are preserved in order to slow deterioration. The first method is maintaining a stable temperature every day, because sudden changes in temperature can be more dangerous than no climate control at all. Objects made from organic materials such as paper, leather, and wood dry out if there's a sudden temperature change. And so in the event of a loss of power, museums have backup power sources to maintain temperatures. The second method of preservation is maintaining relative humidity, which is the amount of moisture in air. With metals, they can corrode or develop mold if humidity levels fluctuate. Materials such as paper and leather can become brittle or fragile in case of low humidity. And so museums often have different levels of humidity for different collections. Museums also have sensors to monitor and adjust levels of humidity. Thus, we see the two ways in which archaeological artifacts are preserved in
So
museums.
the AI heard in New Zealand instead of in museums, it should say. But that's her whole response. It's everything written out. And let's see how she did. If you put the example into My Speaking Score, this website uses the SpeechRater software. You can use it as well. Check it out, myspeakingscore.com. They don't have a pronunciation score. The closest thing they have is a vowel score, and she scored a 99 out of 100. So, in other words, the short answer is your pronunciation, as long as it's intelligible, as long as it's understood, doesn't really have an impact on your score. And so she did really well. You might have some, depending on where you're from and your experience, you might have had some trouble understanding what she's saying, but I could understand everything she's saying. Her vocabulary and grammar are very strong. She's confident, and clearly she's been speaking English for a while and she's at a very high level. So she would score very well. But one of the most common problems with pronunciation is syllable stress. Now, this is where pronunciation becomes an issue. So when you pronounce the wrong syllables in multi-syllabic words, that's when you might get a lower score for pronunciation. And let me show you what I'm talking about here. So in her response, she had words like preserved, declaration, temperature, dangerous. These are longer words. And these are words that you will use more in questions 3 and 4. When you're talking about academic stuff, academic vocabulary, the words are longer. Now, she's probably from South Asia, probably from India, so she doesn't have this issue as badly as somebody who maybe from Europe might have more of a trouble with this because they put the stress on the wrong syllable. And because they put the stress on the wrong syllable, it's hard to understand what the person's saying. And I'll show you some examples of this. So these are the multi-syllabic words, and the part in red is what should be stressed. So declaration, declaration, declaration. You might hear somebody say declaration, declaration. Temperature, 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 temperature. So you hear how when I put the temperature, it's harder to understand. Temperature, 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 temperature. Or dangerous, 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 dangerous. I'm not trying to impersonate anybody, just putting the stress in the wrong place here. So when you have the stress in the wrong place, it's harder to understand, and a lot of software, a lot of artificial intelligence can hear that. They can hear when you put the stress in the wrong place. And so that's part of your score. I'm going to show you an example of a student who got a rhythm score of 18 out of 100. Rhythm is syllable stress, if you put the stress in the right word when it's a longer word. This student here, oh, before I get to this student's example, let me shout out speakerenglish.com. I do it every video, but I have to shout it out because I really believe that this is the best way to improve your speaking. It's a 30-day study plan. You get up to 90 days, but guaranteed to improve your score in 30 days. You have nothing to lose, just 15 minutes a day of practice, and a community, teachers like me, there to help you. Check it out, speakerenglish.com. But I'm excited to show the student example here because I think you'll understand what I mean when you hear it.
So according to the lecture,
lecture, lecture, lecture, lecture, lecture, lecture, lecture. You hear the difference of how she's saying it and how I'm saying it. It's just, it's just the stress is in the wrong place, and then that kind of messes up everything.
The artifact
that was good.
deterioration is inevitable. That's why a museum preserves.
So inevitable was a good example. Inevitable, 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 inevitable. So maybe like at the end of the bull, she stressed that too strongly. So she's got to practice that. She's got to practice pronouncing these words with the right stress in the right way. So that's what she has to do. She's got to look at where the stress is and practice that. Now, how should she do that? How should she practice that? She should look at her transcript, take the words that have more syllables, declaration, temperature, dangerous, and practice pronouncing them in something like a Google Doc. So I'll show you an example right now. Okay, so let's pretend this is the student's response here. And she had some trouble with preserved and declaration. Preserved, or I don't know, whatever. It says something wrong. So I'm going to go to Tools and go to, let's see here, where is it? Voice typing, where's voice? There it is, voice typing. Okay, I have English US. And I'm going to just speak, and I'm going to try to match what I say. So lecture, lecture. Here we go. The lecture discusses how archaeological artifacts are preserved in order to store the declaration. This word is wrong, declaration. I'm not sure what she's trying to say here. But anyway, my pronunciation is correct. So that's what you would do. Let me go back to the presentation. So you would go through a Google Doc and then you would practice the pronunciation of those words. But I actually show this in more detail in this video here, so I'm going to put a link here of this activity where if you're having trouble pronouncing certain words, it might have to do with syllable stress. You're putting the stress in the wrong place and you need to do some practice with that, and a great way to practice that is voice typing. Check that video out here about pronunciation problems. But this student had no problem with her pronunciation. The first response we heard, it was great. So unless you're having some problems with syllable stress or just in being understood, then your pronunciation should be fine. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you in the next one.